Welcome once again to the platform Nigeria. We're live at the Covenant Place, Igomu, Lagos. The platform is powered by the Covenant Christian Center. Our next speaker is His Excellency, the former governor of Anambra State, Mr. Peter Obi. Peter Gregory Obi is the recent past governor of Anambra State. He's an alumnus of Nigeria University of Nigeria Nsukka, Harvard Business School, Lagos Business School, Kellogg School of Management, London School of Economics and Political Science, Columbia, Oxford, and Cambridge Universities. While in office, he served as the Chairman, Board of Securities and Exchange Commission, and as a Special Advisor to the President on Finance. He is the former Chairman of Fidelity Bank and has also held other executive positions in several blue-chip companies in Nigeria.
Well, I will start by thanking Pastor and his team, but I'm sure if you're in my position, you'll be feeling so bad standing here that everything is being said about politicians and I'm the only politician here. Well, let me thank the pastor. This is a wonderful, wonderful work. I came here and listening to all the speeches. The reason why I wanted to know what is all this all about when I was invited. I've never seen this before. I've never watched it before. So when they invited me, they insist, I must, but they kept texting me, and they said, well, let me just come and see what these people are doing around this place. I didn't know it's a place where politicians run into trouble. We have a country. We have a country where I give you a few. I know they say statistics don't work, but I need to use a few statistics to tell you how good and bad things are and what you can do based on what every speaker here has said. This year, your country is expected to, expected revenue for this year is 7.2 trillion from both the states and the federal government. The expected expenditure is 11.4 trillion. It's 11.4 trillion. That's a deficit of about 4.2 trillion. This is the type of debts that have already been incurred a year ago by the same government. They will tell you today that Nigerian debt to GDP is under 20%, is small. That's what you hear. This year, the federal government provided for debt servicing 38% of their budget, of the revenue, 38% to service the debt. Because the revenue they are getting is not enough, half of the year, they use 51% to service the debt, and they are borrowing more. You will hear words like, we are going to spend our way out of recession. I'm sure you have heard it. There's nothing wrong in borrowing. Let me say it here. Just like we are talking about selling assets, there's nothing wrong in borrowing. But the question is, what are you borrowing for? In a recession, the only way to come out of recession is to do what? Spend for growth. And you can only spend for growth either from savings or from borrowing. And since we don't have savings, you've heard it, how our savings we have squandered, whether it's crude, excess crude, anything, by the governors, everybody was right. The money is gone. But now, in order to spend, we need to borrow. And there's nothing wrong in borrowing, But the question is, what are you borrowing for? Are you borrowing for consumption? Are you borrowing for production? The fear is that we are borrowing for consumption, because we can't see what we use the past borrowing or what we sold before for, and that is the crisis we face. And that is the critical thing everybody has to watch. When you borrow for consumption, when you have no savings, you're heading for a disaster. And I give you an example using two countries. When they talk about debt to GDP, the country with the highest debt to GDP is Japan. Japan debt to GDP is 246%. However, Japan have the highest net asset of any country in the world. They have 1.3 trillion in US bonds and dollar bonds and everything. So they have money, so they can afford to borrow. Greeks have 180%. Because they didn't have money, they collapsed. Because there was no savings. And that is the crisis. So when you see people like me say when they wanted to give money to governors and say bailout, I was a governor, I should be supporting it. But I disagreed. I said no, before we give them the money, let them tell us what they are doing, because it is wrong for us to pay a bill of a drunk while he's still in the bar. He has to come out of the bar first, and he will settle what he has drunk before. And that is where I disagree. I believe that, for me, I don't want to talk about federal government today. My topic is, the topic they gave me is cutting the cost of governance. And I don't want to talk about federal government. Other experts will talk about them. But let me talk about where I serve, the subnational government. Out of this 11.4 trillion expenditure expected this year, the states are 5.4. And I believe that this 5.4, we can save at least $1 trillion. At least they won't borrow it because it's going to be borrowed. We can save $1 trillion. And people will say to me, how are you going to save it? How? One, I always say it. Out of this so-called 5.4 trillion, 12 to 15% is used in running the office of the governor, including the so-called controversial security votes, aids, everything takes almost between 12 and you're looking at about 600 to 800 billion. Thereby, I want you to listen to me. Thereby, if you decide to reduce it to 3 to 5%, it will be between 200 and 300 billion. You save at least 450 to 600 billion. That's a saving of 450 billion. If you decide to do proper procurement, competitive procurement that is competitive, you save as much as the same amount. So with these two, you've saved almost 900 billion. If you decide to do away with the unconstitutional office of First Lady, it's very unconstitutional and adds a lot of confusion to what is happening. It costs an average state today about 2 billion to run that office. And all the office does is create confusion. So if you do away with it, as 2 billion average in a state, you have saved additional to 2 billion, which is 72 billion naira. Add it to our 900, we have 970. If you decide today, the average, most states have about an average of 6 bulletproof vehicles. Today is about 100 million naira for one. And if you times it, 100 million today, times 6, then times 36, it comes to about 21.6 billion. But if you reduce it to 2, it will be about 7.2 billion, and you save about 14 point something billion. If you decide, the average government house have about 25 jeeps. Today's price is about 35 to 40 million. So you're looking at an average of if you use 35, it's 875 million naira each, multiplied by 36. Again, if you reduce it from 25 to 8, you save about 15 billion. We don't need dispatch rider or whatever these people that create a lot of noise. You don't need that machine. You can go without them. Each of those machines, each of those machines costs about 12 to 15 million naira. And I can tell you most states have about 6, 7, 8 of them. If we do away with them, you will find out that it's at another savings of probably 3 billion naira. Traveling. 1 minute. Traveling. Every government house or governor can tell you the number of traveling budgets, logistics, they call it lots of name, is almost 500 to 600 million. I believe you can do with, if you times again 600 times 36, I believe you can do all your travels for a third of that. You save 115. So if you look at what I've showed you now, you're going to save over 1 trillion. And I can tell you it is practical. People who said to me, Peter, how is this possible? How is it not possible? My dear, I was the governor. When I came to office, my first 4 trips to Abuja, I traveled with over 30 people. Over 30. Everybody have a title to be in the plane. Everybody have a title to do this. So, wait a minute. I'm the only person invited to Abuja. I pay for that